Do you want to learn how to be a podcast professional and how to actually make money from your podcast and how to produce a podcast that'll make you money? Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about today in this episode of Coaches and Content. Today, I have a guest friend of mine who's a big podcaster, the biggest podcast producer in the wrestling industry. I know Joe's humble, but I'll say that. But today I have podcast producer extraordinaire, Joe Feeney. Joe, how are we doing today?
I'm doing real good, man. How are you?
Good. Let's make some noise for Joe taking up the time to come on here. The funny story, it just so happens Joe produces one of the biggest wrestling podcasts out there, and he's a host on it. It's called Keepin It 100 with two other professional wrestlers named Conan and Disco Inferno. And it just so happens that Joe and I are Philly brethrens. Yes. And so we just connected, and we're two guys that love wrestling. So here we are today.
Yeah, and we met for the first time at the arena, that show when Conan came in, right?
Yeah. So we met at a meet and greet. Joe holds meet and greets where the audience can come and meet the host. So I was there, and we found out that we both live in the same area. But Joe, so why don't we give people a background, because you do a lot of different shows, you do a lot of different things. So before I start really getting into things, why don't we give people your background and your credentials?
Well, it's funny because I kind of backdoored it into podcasting. Like I was always looking for something to do, right? Like I want to get into something creative. I was approaching my mid-30s, and I was managing a warehouse. And I was just like, dude, I can't do this for another 30 years, So I started looking at going back to school. I was taking creative writing classes, screenwriting, stuff like that. And my warehouse closed. So I started having a lot more free time. I had some money saved, some severance and stuff like that. So I was taking some time off, and I just decided that I wanted to try to make an attempt to get into the wrestling business. Was something that I'd always been a fan of. You cross that with the writing and everything. I was like, maybe I can get involved in it creatively somehow. So my wife convinced me to go to this seminar at the Monster Factory, which is close by to Philly. Not that close, but close enough driving distance. And I went for a seminar that they were putting on it was basically called The Business of the Business. And it was how to get into wrestling when you're not going to wrestle, and I was old and broken down already and not in shape. So certainly wasn't looking to get into it that way. So from being at the seminar, I made some connections with the guys that worked there, with the owner, and some guys are on TV now that were there. There's Matt Riddle and Damian Priest and QT Marshall, Nick Camarado. Those guys were all there at that time. And basically how it started was the owner of the Monster Factory, Danny Cage, was like, well, what do you want to do? Well, I want to get into writing. He said, all right, well, how about, you can write previews and reviews of the shows here. You can interview my guys, help me get the stuff around. So that's what I started to do. I started to review, I was reviewing early days of NXT for OneWrestling.com. I was sending all the Monster Factory stuff around. I started being able to review DVDs and stuff like that from High Spots. I got on PW Insider and The Observer and stuff. I was doing stuff like that. And someone who had been reading some of my stuff was like, you should try to get into podcasting because it's hot right now, and especially wrestling, the dedicated fan base and all that. I wasn't really sure about it. I didn't know what style I wanted to do. I wasn't crazy about hearing my own voice either and stuff like that.
And not to cut you off, but what year was this that you're talking about now?
2014.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's funny. The warehouse closed in August, and the first episode of Creative Control was like September 15th or something. Like I just wound up jumping right into it. But after the guy coming up with that idea, I was like, you know what, I'll give it a shot. So I did one show. I had Danny from the Monster Factory on and Joel Gertner. And it's probably a nightmare to listen to now. I did it like over the phone. Like I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to edit. Like I just recorded it and plopped it up. I'm sure I couldn't even listen to it today. But it kind of just grew from there. I got more and more comfortable, and I started getting lucky when it came to guests. I got guys early on in my run. Creative Control was my old show, Creative Control with Joe Feeney, and I had Vince Russo, Bruce Pritchard, Disco, Diamond Dallas Page, Matt Riddle, Al Snow. So I started getting really lucky with guests, and it started getting me some attention. And that's basically how I did that for 2 years and change before I got onto a Conan show.
That's awesome, man. That's why I always like getting an entrepreneur. You're an entrepreneur. I like getting the backstories in these interviews because it's always similar, and it's inspiring to hear, you were in your mid-30s and you found your new career.
Yeah.
You just went for it. And just by you took the steps. You started writing articles, then you started your podcast, and then you fast forward to today. You're editing and producing a ton of podcasts. I forgot you also have your own podcast network, the Creative Control. You're a host on a bunch of podcasts. So I think that kind of stuff's inspiring to hear the progression and the fact that you just went for it.
Yeah, and that's what I like. I'll get DMs and stuff like that, and people ask for advice, and that's basically what I say. I say first, you just got to commit to it if you're going to do it. It's hard to, like I said, I got lucky because I got laid off or whatever, and I had time. If you have a full-time job, trying to really dedicate time to something like this and hunting for ads and guests and all that and editing, it's going to be hard to do. But some people go to work 8 hours a day and still go to school at night or have a side job or do YouTube videos, so it is possible. And the other thing I tell people to expect with podcasting is don't expect to really make $1 until you put in at least a year. I've heard a year. I've heard companies won't look at you, ad companies, till you do 100 episodes, which is almost 2 years if you're doing weekly and stuff. So it is going to be a bit of a wait, unless you hit something that's crazy and everybody jumps on board and all of a sudden companies want to work with you. But usually it's going to take a little time to grow and gain your audience and your fan base and show them that you're not going to be one of these I did 20 episodes and I quit type of shows, because nobody wants to commit their time to that, so.
Yeah. So let's fast forward to today, because you're a one-man podcasting machine, producer, all this stuff. So why don't we briefly touch on, you kind of just touched on it, but you find ads, you edit the shows, you're a host. So why don't we briefly talk about all your job duties, like what you do?
Well, when the first thing I did was my own show, Creative Control. So I was just looking out for myself. And I eventually learned how to find ads and stuff, because the show was improving. I was getting good guests. I was into it. It was getting some notice. I was like, geez, it'd be nice to get paid for this, So I started learning how to get ads. You find different ad agencies, or there's web pages with companies. Hey, just put up your podcast and we'll send ads to you and stuff. And, you might hear from them a couple times a year or whatever. It's really best. I know it's kind of a side note, but if you're running a podcast and you're looking to monetize it, don't just depend on one place or one ad agency or something. Go fishing and find everything you can. Don't be afraid to cold call / cold email companies. I made deals that way too. It's, there's a lot to put into it. But so after Creative Control is when I started working with Conan and Disco. And that came about just because I had Disco on the show. I had Russo on the show. I had Kevin Kleinrock on the show. There was some crossover there. And Conan knew who I was because I would bother him for an interview. And of course, you listen to the show, Conan, he told me to F off for like a year, something like that, maybe longer. But he was cool about it. He's just like, I don't know you, so I'm not going to do it. I just don't know you. I do podcasts for people I know, or if it's something really big, But he had an issue with the guy that he brought on originally as his third co-host / producer. And they were probably only about 25, 30 episodes in when he actually Facebook messaged me and was like, listen, I know you produce your own show and all this, and would you want to try to give this a crack? Come on, Keeping It 100, because he knew I was also a listener. So I was already familiar with the formula of the show. Like, that show's, it's not rocket science, but it's a little more complex. There's segments, there's breaks, there's a cold open, there's drops, and there's just a certain way Conan wanted it done. He knew I knew what the show sounded like, and that I would want to work on it. So he brought me on board. It was a little, there was a little pay, it wasn't great, but it was like, oh, here we go. I'm making money podcasting. All right. So as time went on, I would start to find ads for Conan's show as well, based off what I'd learned on my own show, which led me to figuring, I could probably help other people coming up at least get their podcast notice and get ads on them. So I started Creative Control Network, which, unfortunately and oddly enough, it's probably it's not my highest priority right now because I have so many other things going on, but I do it the best I can for the shows on there. And basically what it is you'd send me a show, I upload it. That way you don't have to pay for a podcast provider. I'll look for ads, so you don't have to waste your time, not waste, but you don't have to put your time into that. You can just dedicate it to the show. And if you have a job, whatever. And Creative Control Network had some wrestling names on it. It's had Dutch Mantel on there, Shane Helms. Right now we have Francine from ECW, Tom Pritchard, and Kevin Sullivan. So we're doing well. It's hot and cold, but it's going well. It's kind of got its own name too. And somewhere in between there, I had made a friend / acquaintances with Conrad Thompson and Bruce Pritchard, who were starting their show, Something to Wrestle. And that is one of those shows that did catch on like wildfire. Like probably within a few months, they were making a profit,
Yeah. Well, I listened to that from the beginning. It's pretty amazing I think it's probably because of their chemistry, but it's pretty amazing how fast that show really took off and really changed the landscape of podcasting and wrestling too. Yeah.
It did, man. I think it was only 15, 20 episodes in, and it was like the must-hear show.
Yeah.
And it's so hot. But though, like I said, I had Bruce on my show. I had Conrad on my show. Those guys knew I could edit. Similar situation. They had an issue with the guy who was editing the show. Conrad knew he had more shows coming down the pike, so they gave me a shot, and I wound up working on, the Pritchard show. That led into working on Eric Bischoff's show. That led to Jim Ross. And, well, we can go over the list if you want. But, yeah, so I work on 8 shows a week for Conrad's network and / podcast Heat, which is like their spinoff,
Mhm.
And then after that, I interviewed Raven, who was an ECW wrestler, and he needed another co-host on his show. So I don't produce or edit that one. I'm on as a personality, but everyone that I work with, whether it's editing or co-hosting or producing, I also look for ads for. So I kind of got my fingers in a lot of pies, and it seems to me that's what you really need to do if you're in this YouTube / podcasting / content creator world. Like, you can't really depend on one thing. Even if you have a podcast that's very successful, you got to have it on YouTube. You got to have a Patreon. You got to have a t-shirt store. You got to have, you know what I mean? You got to make sure you're getting what you can get, and you're not just dedicating yourself to one side of it.
So for people listening on the K100 show, which the biggest show Joe's on, the main host Conan calls Joe the Philly entrepreneur, and this is why he calls him that, is because Joe is an entrepreneur making things happen. He's taking the risk. He's just going at it and going for it. And I think that's awesome to hear, because when you're a little kid, watching Hulk Hogan, watching the Attitude Era, listening to Jim Ross, seeing Eric Bischoff on TV, I know you never would imagine that, you would be working with all these guys today.
No, and it's like I said when we started, I didn't go to that seminar. I think I was like almost my mid-30s. I think I was 33 when I went to that seminar. Prior to that, I went to shows in South Philly all the time at the ECW Arena, 2300 Arena, where we met.
Yeah.
And the show would end and I would just leave. I wasn't one of those people that hung around or tried to meet up after the show or really cared about pictures or autographs. Like, they always say, stay on your side of the guardrail or whatever. That's what I always did. I just didn't. I don't know. I've talked to different guys about that. I don't know why something didn't click for me. Like, maybe we should try to get involved. Maybe I didn't think it was possible. But so yeah, I finally decided to get started, and now I'm like, I'll go to the shows, I'll go backstage. I know a lot of the guys and stuff, and it's a totally different experience and stuff. It almost actually has harmed my fandom. Like, if I'm not recording or editing or whatever, I don't put wrestling on much to Conan's chagrin. He's like, you're on a wrestling show, you got to watch the shows. I'm like, nah, they don't want to hear my reviews anyway. They want to hear you guys. Or like, I don't listen to podcasts that much because it's my full-time job. You don't want to like, if you're a garbage man, you don't want to be picking up trash when you're off hours or whatever. So that's an unfortunate side effect of it, that I kind of lost a little of my fandom and love for the podcast and stuff like that. But yeah, it is a lot different working with people I never would have expected. And it just turned out really cool. It helps me, it's cool to meet people that have had success, and it also helps, I'll get you tickets to this show or come down to this convention and stuff. So yeah, it's all good. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think it says a lot about your work ethic and you as a person. 'Cause, we know each other pretty well, so I know the type of guy you are, and it shows your work ethic and the type of person you are, that you progress from starting with Conan. And even in the beginning, I know you were on the show a little bit, but not really. I remember your mic used to be like really low, like you sounded like you were super quiet.
Yeah.
But then you progress your way onto being like a main host on there, to working with all these other guys. So that really kind of attributes to, you have to have the work ethic and be a good guy to be able to work with all these people.
Yeah, and if like, as far as getting into podcasting and stuff, like I said, I didn't start with much confidence because I didn't like to hear my own voice. I didn't, you worry if you get stuck on a thought or if you forget something. Oh my God, I have nothing to talk about. And it's, it takes a little time to get comfortable with. If you're not someone who's done a lot of public speaking, or someone who does stand up, for instance, stuff like that, it takes a little bit. I mean, but if you're a person who has a passion for a certain topic or a sport or a TV show or whatever, there's podcasts for everything. And there's YouTube channels for everything. It's an exploding job market, content creators. I mean, you think about it, between podcasts, YouTube guys, Twitch, can I curse on here? Sorry about that. You can bleep me out.
Yeah, you can. No, you can.
Okay, all right. Even people doing the OnlyFans shit or Patreon or whatever, like, you paid subscriptions for fans. Like, there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of ways to get into it and make a few bucks.
So are you saying, are we going to see a Joe Feeney OnlyFans? Is that what you're hinting at?
No, God, no way. No way. I've joked about it with my wife. I can't convince her. She's like, well, I could sell feet pics. I'm like, you're not selling any feet. You're not doing anything. Forget it. Forget I said anything. So.
I know. So you talk about your wife a little bit. Is she a wrestling fan? I know you guys talk about you watch it a little bit. I'm just curious what she thinks about wrestling, because most women think it's stupid, you know?
Yeah, no, she's not a fan. I've twisted her arm and made her go to a couple of shows with me, and like occasionally if I see something on TV and I want to get her like outsider, not even a casual fan, I'll say, hey, come down, and for instance, like, hey, watch this entrance, and I'll show her Killer Cross and Scarlett's entrance or whatever it is that I'm trying to get a read on. Or I'll put on AEW sometimes if I'm upstairs with her hanging in the bedroom. All right, just watch some of this with me. See, give me what you see, or pointers or whatever, or thoughts, and then I'll just steal them and use them on the podcast. But no, not a fan. And I think it's funny. Like, I don't think she can believe what I'm up to. You know, it's very surprising. Like I said, it's been 7-8 years since I started my show, but still, it's like all this stuff seemed to kind of come together in a very short period of time, and now I'm just pretty comfortable and confident with everything I'm doing.
Yeah, man, I really think it's that's why I wanted to have you on here too. I think it's a pretty inspirational story to go from, you know, you didn't have a bad job, but you had a job that you necessarily didn't want to do. Right. You had a passion for wrestling, and I don't want to say you stumbled your way into this, but you worked your way up, you know, you put in the work.
Yeah, well, once I got in and started to make some inroads here and there, you know, I really did commit. All right, I want to learn how to get ad revenue. I want to learn about YouTube, which I don't do that much, but I know about it. Or I want to know about this or that, or I want to make new connections, or I want to work with other shows. Like, for instance, like I said, I'm self-taught on editing. I'm self-taught on how to find ads and stuff like that. And just recently, in the past few months, like I went to one of Conrad's guys who runs Podcast Heat, and I said, listen, I know you guys know that I edit shows, but I also do all the ad sales over here for these different shows. And I know Conan does very well. Raven Show does okay. Creative Control Network, I do as well as I can, and you know, but I know how to do it. So why don't you just bring me on, or not even bring me on, have me as like an associate, and I'll hunt for ads for Conrad shows now too. Like, it's just a matter of seeing opportunity or creating it for yourself even.
Yeah, I mean, that's a true entrepreneur's mindset, is like finding a problem and solving it. Yeah, I would love to talk about the different methods of how people can make money off their podcast, because I think that's the big hook with this is, you know, you guys have so many different revenue streams. So why don't we talk about the ads first? You know, if you have a secret sauce and you don't want to give anything away, I understand, but what is like some of the ways that someone what are some of the ways, you know, that people can find ads and get sponsored? I know you mentioned, you know, you have to have a certain number of episodes, maybe a certain number of viewers, but in general, how does someone get sponsored on their podcast?
Well, there's a lot of podcast providers out there, and then by no means I'm affiliated with them, but they're not paying me or anything to say this, but I'll say it because I believe it, because I moved all my shows onto them, and I moved Conan and Raven on them. Spreaker's a great company to use to upload your podcast to. I mean, it'll give you the distribution that kind of anywhere else can, but it'll get you on Apple and Spotify and blah, blah, blah. But they have a system where you can put mid-rolls throughout your show. And even if your show is not, it doesn't, you know, 600 listeners or 100 or 1,600 or 16,000, whatever, rather than flat out doing your show and not having any revenue from it, that's one way to get revenue. You just put these mid-roll points in, and based on where you are in the country and the demos that listen to your show, they insert ads, boom, boom, boom. And it's, you get paid every time someone listens to it. So that's a start. Like soliciting ads and, you know, knocking door to door, basically. You come up with a like a form letter explaining who you are, what's your podcast, or, you know, like you did when I first came on, what's your background, you know, what's your podcast, what is your audience like, what are your numbers, and previous experience with sponsors. If you don't have it, you know, just I'm starting out this, but I have a loyal fan base, whatever, and just sell yourself and take that and kind of, you know, whether you hear an ad on the radio or it's just a product you like specifically, find a way to contact these companies. I got involved with Manscaped just from, you know, cold calling them, basically cold emailing them. And Ridge Wild I used to have. That was just for me finding them. And right now, Fight Camps on Conan's show, I just went after them. You know, it's just, that's another way to do it, is just to find companies, find stuff you like. Maybe you heard them on a podcast. So, okay, they're already receptive to being on podcasts. Cool, let me check with them, see if they're interested in my show. The other way is there's ad agencies. Normally they'll solicit you, but you can try with them. Just like, I don't have them off the top of my head, but Google, you know, podcast sales, podcast ad agencies, radio ad agencies, whatever. And there's usually a contact form, and you can hit them up and say who you are, what your show is, the usual info. And there's a few websites too where, like I said, all you have to do is put up your show info, and they'll have it on file in their catalog. And when somebody like what's Joe Rogan's stuff called? What's his company?
Alpha Brain or something.
Yeah, well, yeah,
on
yeah, on
it.com.
it.
Yeah.
Let's say On It goes to this ad company and says, "Hey, we're looking for sports shows. We want to do spots in the third quarter, whatever." They'll send them a list of sports shows, and there's going to be your show or whatever. That's another way to do it. So, I would say find a podcast provider that has that capability to put the mid rolls in where you'll get paid every time they're listened to. Just do the work. Write some kind of email, that you can copy and paste or whatever. Of course, change the pertinent info when you need to. Hit up some companies and see, what kind of results you get. Like I said, it could be anything. If like I have Francino on Creative Control Network, so when I do that for her, obviously I'm searching for companies that I think would be more receptive to a female host. And actually, that's a good thing, because you imagine how many dudes you have with wrestling podcasts or sports or MMA or even comedy. That female hosts, they definitely attract advertisers, from what I've learned with her. And then, like I said, just Google your way around. You can find ad agencies, you can find radio agencies. They'll either take you in or they won't, but it doesn't hurt to ask. And you're always in their email, always on file. And there's also websites where you can upload your information, and then they will find shows or sponsors for you if you fit what the sponsors are looking for as far as downloads, show catalog, length that the podcast has been out, and past success.
Yeah, so actually, because of you, I forgot I'm on Spreaker as well, because I asked you what should I be on. So I made I made $3.56 so far. So making some money off it.
That's what I mean. Like it's not, if you're just starting out, it's probably not going to be crazy, but it's still $3.56 you wouldn't have made on, most other providers, And the other providers that offer that service, they're not looking for shows that have under 20,000 downloads anyway. So that's why I think Spreaker's a really good company, good fit for a lot of people that are looking to make at least a few bucks and get their stuff going.
Yeah, and you mentioned the sponsorship too. I think that's a great way to go, is you find something in your niche that'll appeal to your audience, because that stuff actually works. So I'll give you a good example. I always heard about there's Athletic Greens, which is like a vitamin in powder form you basically drink. It's all your vitamins. I'm sure people have seen the ad. They're a pretty big company.
Yeah.
And I was kind of on the fence about getting it. It was kind of expensive. And then you guys are the Conan show, Keepin' It 100. You guys were sponsored by them. And I heard you guys talking about it, and I was on the fence about it. So actually, so for people who don't know, how it works is basically they give you an affiliate link. So they'll say, you guys say on the show, go to whatever, athleticgreen.com/Conan, and then that'll help support the show. And I'll get the product that I want. So I bought Athletic Greens, and I still drink it, and actually it's good, and I think it works. So that's like a great example, I think, of how to make money, through podcasting.
Yeah, I like it a lot, and you bring up a good point. Like, I'm not crazy about overselling. Like, I don't want to beat listeners down and stuff like that. And you got to do this, you got to do that. Like, sometimes you'll hear people on shows like, "Don't skip the ads. We need you to listen." I'm never going to say that. That to me is like pushy. But it works out for listeners and for the show. Like, if you really love a show, you listen all the time. Like you said, you hear a product that you wanted to try it through the show, because you're going to get your 20% off and your free shipping or whatever it is that they're going to offer to listeners. It's win-win. Even when I was just a podcast listener, I would do stuff like that. Oh, I'm going to get a shirt and help these guys out. I'm going to check out this product. It's a symbiotic relationship. But if you're doing ads and stuff like that, like I said, I'm not crazy about beating the listeners down, but make them understand a little bit. Maybe this helps the show out. This is actually what keeps us going. This is good for us. It makes it easier for us to dedicate time to it, stuff like that. And the people that are loyal and listen and appreciate, the entertainment you provide or whatever, they'll check it out. They'll help you out. I mean, that's what I've learned so far.
Yeah, I like how you guys phrase it. You always say, most of the time it's stuff that you guys have actually used or you tried, that you endorse. You're not just like shilling stuff that you don't even care about. And then how you phrase it, how it helps support the show and the operation. I think that's it's a good way to put it. So it's not just like, hey, this is an ad. It's like, no, you can, we're listening to the show for free. So, why not give back if you're getting it for free? Especially me. I've been listening since the beginning. I listen every week, and getting it for free is pretty amazing.
Yeah. And like Conan always, like you said, he always puts it in the ads. Like, we're not going to try to just throw any old thing at you. We try this stuff and then we work with the companies, and that's true. That is true. So
Yeah, and so and another way you guys make money, because I want to bring it up because I mentioned how the show's free, and so for the K100 Conan show, people don't know it's Joe, and then it's these two pro wrestlers, Conan and Disco, and Conan and Disco still kind of wrestle, they still travel and do shows. So what you guys started doing was these meet and greets where if they're in a certain city and you're a listener, if you're on Patreon, which we'll talk about, you pay for the Patreon, you get to meet them, or you can just pay out of pocket. So that's what I did. I paid out of pocket just because, I love the show. I wanted to meet you guys. And that's how we met. So I think part of why I did it is because I listened to the show for free for so long. I wanted to support the show, support you guys, and I got to meet you guys. So I think like doing those types of, I know you can't really do them now or whatever. It's COVID. We're getting over COVID, but I think that was a great idea to do too.
yeah, and we took advantage of it when we could because, as a listener to the show, Disco doesn't like, he's not going to travel. He has a full-time job that he does along with podcasting. So it's tough to get him. But when we're in the same city, cool. Disco had a booking in Philly. Conan was going to be here. All right, let's do the meet and greet. Or if we're all in Vegas, all right, let's try to do it there and stuff. So it's not as easy to do with those guys. But I mean, yeah, that is a great idea for a show if you start to build up. I've been checking out this a show on YouTube, and it's a podcast too. It's called Who Are These Podcasts? And what it does is it basically takes podcasts that aren't that great, like a lot are when they start, and then they'll watch the podcast, listen to it, and they'll poke fun at it. Well, their show is getting so popular that they're doing live shows too. They just did a bar in Detroit. They did a bar in Nashville. They're going to New York. So there's all kinds of possibilities if you can get the show on the right track and going along and get a loyal enough fan base that loves your stuff. I mean, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, a lot of these guys are becoming rock stars, going on tours. Like I love, so Conrad, people don't know, I've actually talked about Conrad a lot on this podcast just because I love how he uses the podcast to leverage his mortgage business. But
Yeah.
what he would do is he's doing these live shows for his podcast because he's a host on a lot of them. And I love how he'll piggyback off of major wrestling events. So if there's a big wrestling event, pay-per-view on a Sunday in a city, he'll do a live show on a Saturday and just piggyback off that audience. So there are people who are touring just off of their podcast and people come to see them live.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, if I started in let me see, I think they started their shows at the beginning of 2015. So it's 7+ years later, but in those 7 years they've done multiple live shows. They created a whole convention, and Connor just put on a wrestling show / convention in Nashville that I'm sure made a whole lot of money just from seeing all the people that attended it and stuff like that. So that's another good point. You get in there, you get popular enough, you grow your show, and you're going to see opportunities all around you. Oh, I can make money with this. Maybe I could do shirts. Some Patreons, it's like, you get on this tier and we'll call you once a month. And just a lot of it is personal touch too. Your listeners are going to want interactivity. They're going to want to communicate with you, or leave YouTube comments, or review the show and put that on Apple Podcasts for you, or just mention you on a message board or on Twitter or something like that. It really, like I said, symbiotic earlier. It's the audience is the most important thing, and treating them well is the most important thing you can do next to your commitment to the show and being reliable.
Yeah, it's one of the things I love that Conan says a lot is about over delivering in every area. And I think that's why he's been so successful too, is because that's like, those are his values and his morals, and make sure you over deliver.
Yeah, and I mean, we certainly, a lot of shows are just an hour and they're done. We record, man, it could be 6 to 8 hours a week, and just use different things out of that. We've found that by having more than one show out a week, we put out like a variety now where we have our main show, which is the most popular one. We recorded a lot of the listener Q&A every week, which we call the mailbag. Oh, there's a lot of mailbag left. Let's put that out as a bonus. People like it when Conan and Disco talk politics or pop culture. Let's make that separate. Let's call it K100 Talks. We'll do that. You know what? We have a whole back catalog here. You know what? I'm going to take the back catalog. I'm going to chop it up, and I'm going to do some best of shows. We're going to put that out. We call it K100 Rehash. So we thought of different ways to, monetize the amount of time and content that we had. Oh, we're already putting this time in a week. Why not use this for this? Or why not use this for this? We have this whole back catalog. We can use it. Why not just reuse it,
I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot about that and I wanted to talk about it, how it's super smart. So just to explain to people how it works. So you go on Spreaker, it sets you up with a podcast feed on Apple, Spotify, all those podcasts. And then basically you can put out as many episodes as you want. And the more content you put out, the more money you make because you're getting paid per stream, per listen. So what you guys did was super smart is, you know, you have the main show that's like 2 hours, and then you essentially have 2 other shows 2 times a week that are like 30 minutes, an hour. And it's like you said, it's extra content that you already have. So I'm all about doing things with purpose and repurposing content and reusing it as many different ways as you can. So that's super smart that you guys are taking stuff you already have. It's really not that much work it's probably already edited. You just kind of have to upload it, title it, and label it. So that's super smart. And on top of that, it's good content too. You know, I listen to, like you said, you have the second show where it's all about current events, current topics, and the other one's all extra mailbag questions. So that's super smart. So how did that come about? Was that your idea, or how did you guys come up with it?
Yeah, Rehash was my idea. I think it's the one Conan will publicly give me credit for, because that's what I said to him. I said, dude, we got 5 years of stuff. There's stuff, you know, new listeners haven't heard. Why don't we do this best of? We add it on Spreaker. We'll get the ad revenue from a second show a week. And that's it, you know, and he went for it. And that's a lot of fun for me to do because I get to look back at stuff I either was or wasn't involved in. And it's interesting to hear the show progress and, you know, just hear history in wrestling. Like, oh my God, what was happening in 2018? Let's take a look at that and put it out for people to check out. K100 Talks was something that Conan wanted to do because he always heard from listeners. Like I said, you know, I love when you guys talk politics or, you know, global affairs or pop culture, or, you know, we talked about little things that happen. Oh, Chris Rock got slapped by Will Smith. You know, well, let's talk about that. And that got good downloads. Oh, there's a fight backstage at wrestling. Let's talk about that. You know, and so the topics vary, but people really seem to like that. And then the extra mailbag, it was the same thing I told those guys. I was like, we're already doing it. We put it on Patreon. You know, we give it to them first because they're the subscribers. And then, you know, a few days to a week later, we just drop it on Spreaker. And the people, maybe it could inspire them to join the Patreon, or even if it doesn't, they're listening. We're going to get the ad revenue from it. So, and that can having the multiple shows also helps with ad companies, because I'll say, hey, you're buying a spot for such and such a week. You know, you're a new client. I'll put your ad on at no charge on our secondary show and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, and you mentioned Patreon. That's definitely something I want to talk about. So for those that don't know, there's sites called like patreon.com or sites like that where as a content creator, you can charge people a monthly fee to access your content. So, you know, some people, they might record 2 hours for a podcast. They might release 1 hour for free. The other ones they charge for it. Maybe it's $5, $10, $20 a month. I know you guys started your Patreon a while ago. And so basically, like I said, you're repurposing the content. So you're recording all this extra stuff for people who want to pay for it, and then you reuse it all these other ways. But I would love to talk about, you guys have like different tiers and stuff. So why don't you explain, you know, the different tiers and how it works, you know, different price points and what you get, stuff like that.
Yeah, it started shortly before I got involved with them, but I honestly, from my memory, think that Conan, whether he learned about it through Kevin Kleinrock, one of the guys who you know, used to assist with the show. I don't know where he heard from it, but they were the first Patreon that I saw.
Yeah, me too.
So
yeah.
You got to be being the first person to, you know, break down the wall or whatever is tough. So they didn't really know what to charge. They were charging $1 a month or $5 a month or whatever, and they would just put up the extra audio from the show. When I came along, I was like, you know what, we should change the tiers a little bit. We can put out full ad-free versions, up it on this tier, which would be $15. We have $5, which gets the extra short segments, $10, which gets, you know, longer unedited segments that weren't on there. And then $15 gets your ad-free shows, you know, as early as I can put them out. Usually I try to do 24 hours before. And then the $25 and $40 tiers is more for interaction. So if you're on those tiers, you get to come on a live round table with the hosts. You know, we try to do it a couple of times a month. It used to be more, especially during COVID. We were doing a lot more. And you'll also get a free plug and shout out on the show. So basically, yeah, you're paying for Patreon. You're getting all the free audio content and you get to interact. But now also people that listen to Conan's show, which is in the tens of thousands, they're going to hear your name. They're going to hear your Twitter handle. They're going to hear your podcast name. They're going to hear if you have a merch store. They're going to hear if you just have another, you could be, you know, setting up people's vacations or whatever. Your business will be on there, you know. So that's something that I thought of that I thought would be worth it to the listeners too, to get these plugs once a month.
Yeah, man, it's so awesome. You guys are so super smart. You know, the three of you, Conan, Disco, three of you guys. So it's super smart, and you keep building. You know, so the show's been around what, like 7 years? You said.
Keepin 100 came out in the summer of 2016, so it's like 6 and change, 6 years, 4 months, something like that.
So you have there's a couple other ways we got to talk about how you make money, but just to recap so far, you have the Patreon where people pay for like extra content. They pay to interact with you guys, which is super cool too. Then what else we talked about? Sponsorships and ads. You know, if you sign up for Spreaker.com, they'll run ads on your stuff so you get paid for when people listen. You could do live shows. The other thing too is what you guys kind of started recently with the YouTube page. You know, once you monetize your YouTube channel, you're pretty much set for life. You make passive income forever. So why don't we talk about a little bit, because you guys didn't really start that till the last couple of years, right?
Yeah, it was. You edit this, right? I'm sorry, I just had to answer this one text.
Oh yeah, it's fine. Is it Conan busting your balls?
No, it's Conrad about something. We should cover that. If you want to get into this full time, you're going to be working 24/7, basically. But I actually, that is something. Like I joke, you know, it always says like, hey, if you do something you love, you never work a day in your life, right? And then I found out that if you work for yourself and with yourself, you're never off the clock. I was like, oh shit. So that was the lesson I learned. But YouTube, I tried to start a YouTube channel early in the show's existence, or in my existence with the show. But I found I didn't have a lot of time, and I put up a clip and it'd get 80, 100 views. And I'm like, well, this isn't going to work. People don't want to listen to a podcast clip on YouTube, just audio with a, steady picture. Well, I was wrong. And we had a listener of the show, Adam Hughes, who had YouTube experience making channels for other, I think he did something with Kevin Smith initially, and he has his own channel, which he just knew YouTube. He knew how to monetize. He knew how to use the right words and the tags, which is important too. And he was like, let me do it. And I said, all right. And he said, it's going to take a little while. I think it took us like 9 months or something, 6 to 9 months to get monetized. Sometimes it's shorter, sometimes it's longer. But yeah, you're exactly right. It's another payment we all can expect once a month. We're consistently adding new clips daily, and then that back catalog that's up there is always going to pay you as well. So I mean, YouTube was a really smart deal. I'm glad Adam came to me about it, and he does a good job and stuff like that. It's just something I couldn't have put on my plate at the time and wasn't as good at it as he is. So that's another thing too. I mean, even if you're an entrepreneur, a self-starter, you want to be your own boss, sometimes you're going to have to delegate or even hire, people and, spread the wealth a little bit, or, share the pie or whatever. And that's what happened with Husey is he came up with something and he gets a nice little chunk off it. And then the rest of us, make money off it as well. And it's, again, like you said, content we already recorded and he's just repurposing it.
Yeah, and I think the big theme with all this too is you have to be consistent and put in the work. Because with YouTube, to monetize the channel, you need 1,000 subscribers, which is not that hard. But the harder part is you need 4,000 hours of watch time. So that means overall, people had to watch your stuff for more than 4,000 hours. Now,
Yeah.
it makes it easier for you guys because you have the built-in audience. You have all this extra audio. But for the average person, it could be tough. But you really got to stick with it.
For sure. It's just like the podcasting, the YouTube it's a building process. So you consistently put up clips, maybe go on there live, do whatever you got to do. There's, like I said, there's plenty of ways to go about growing an audience, but that's certainly it. Be consistent. People, all right, we're going to have a clip every day at 8 p.m. Make sure it's at 8 p.m. because some people might be looking for it or waiting for it. Come on here and we're going to do this live. Another thing YouTube has that we don't do because we just, we use as much free time as these guys have to record things for K100, but other channels are able to do, hey, we're going to be on here live and we'll show you that we'll record the show live for you, or we'll answer questions from YouTube. Then there's another way to make money off that. People can tip you or send you these super chats or whatever it is. So it's another way for people to monetize their content. Like I said, unfortunately, we don't do that, but we still do well off YouTube. So I don't know. It might be a small bit of a loss for us, but it's nothing that's affecting us really.
Yeah, well, the other thing is you have your Patreon, so people are directly paying for that too. So you don't want to upset those. So it's really like finding the line between like, who's paying for what and what should we do where. And, I forgot to mention too, on top of you have your full-time job, Disco has a full-time job, Conan has a full-time job, and you guys are doing all this on top of all that, which is pretty amazing too.
Yeah. Well, Conan works for several different companies. Disco has a full-time job at a club in Vegas. And with me, this is my full-time job now, doing all these different things. Like I said, I created a way for myself to be able to survive by doing editing and recording and hosting, and basically, I don't want to say it's play, but it almost is. Like I get to kind of just bullshit for a few hours a week with different shows, and the editing and stuff like that, and the ad sales is just a way to support that. So I'm pretty happy with what I'm doing, and it took a little bit to figure out, but once I got the rhythm down, like for instance, when I was working for Conrad shows initially, I had, not to get into personal shit, but I was just having a bad year. I lost my mom, different things like that. I don't think I was putting as much into it as I should have. And so rightfully, after a little while, they're like, we want to bring somebody else in to do this. And I said, cool, I totally got it. But after a while, that guy wasn't working out. So I reached back out and I said, hey, things are a little different now. I think if you want to replace this guy, or you want to throw me a couple of gigs, I can show you. And since then, I've been back with those guys for a couple of years, and it's almost been automatic. Like it's gotten so repetitious doing the work, like I can do it a lot faster than I did when I started too. So, the longer you do something, the better you're going to get at it, the more practice and all that. So
Yeah, that's been a common theme in this interview is you're not afraid to go for it, and you put in the work and put in the effort, and you're being patient and working hard. And I think that's probably why you're where you're at now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's been a lot of fun too. It can be time consuming. And sometimes it's like there ain't a place I'd want to be less than sitting at the computer, because it's like, God, I'm like all the time, but it's well worth it. And it's been like an adventure. It really has. It's not something I would have ever predicted, years ago. Even in the beginning of my podcast, I figured I'd just be maybe a podcast guy that made a couple $100 a month or whatever. And it's just grown and grown. So I've been very, very fortunate to make the right connections, and having the freedom to put in the right amount of time and stuff like that. And just, luckily I had the ability to learn this stuff kind of fast, whether it was editing or ad sales and stuff. And yeah, it's, what do they say? Success is a combination of luck and opportunity or whatever. And that's the truth.
Man, it's been a great interview. So as we start wrapping it up, the one last thing I wanted to talk about is, merchandise and t-shirts and things like that, because, you have your t-shirts. I know Conan doesn't really have t-shirt, Disco does, but Conrad with his podcasting network, he does all types of merchandise. So I would love to just talk about that for a little bit. That's like the last piece that we haven't talked about. How you make money from podcasting is merchandising, selling t-shirts. I don't think, does anyone really sell anything besides t-shirts? I think that's it.
On K100, no. Raven sells shirts. All the merchandising and stuff on Creative Control Network, whoever does it, it's separate. With Creative Control Network, what I do is I search for ads, but part of the deal is if you find your own ads, then I don't take any of that, so that was just a way for me to try to get people to come on the network. That's how I was able to attract shows. Hey, if you find ads, keep it, so it puts the onus on me to find the ads so that I can get my piece of that, as far as merchandise, I think one of the brilliant things Conrad did starting off was when you bought a shirt, you got a phone call. Yeah. And again, that's the personal touch that people want. You could buy anybody's shirts on it's Pro Wrestling Tees. You could buy a Steve Austin shirt or Scott Hall or Nash or Punk or anybody. When Conrad put up the t-shirt store for him and Bruce for their first show, that's what they did. Buy a shirt, we're going to call you. People that already started to love the show and were listeners. That's just a little something extra. And that's things you have to figure out based on your audience and stuff. What can I offer extra that's going to make them more loyal? It's going to give them something too. And it's different for every show, but I always thought that was brilliant though. Oh yeah, you buy the shirt, we're going to give you a phone call. And people really dug that, and they were very successful with shirts from the start.
I forgot about that. Yeah, that was super smart. So basically to explain to people, there was like a big guy, Bruce Pritchard, a big writer, personality in wrestling. And basically when they started their podcast, what they did was if you would have bought one of their t-shirts, and all the t-shirts were based off inside jokes or lingo from the show. Basically, if you were to buy the shirt, Bruce would personally call you to thank you. And that just goes back to how smart Conrad is. That's a super smart idea.
Yeah, I thought it was brilliant, and it's something that actually became so successful that they couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah,
I'm not sure, some guys probably still do, but it's not like it used to be. And so for the wrestling fans listening, the stuff that Conrad did on his different shows with Bruce or Eric or Tony Schiavone, Jim Ross, all those guys are working. Or well, not Eric was, but like for instance, Tony Schiavone was out of wrestling. But their show became so popular and so successful, it got him announcing gigs again, which is what he did originally. He was a wrestling announcer. up to now where he's working for a company called AEW, like working behind the scenes, and he's one of the top dogs. So, and Eric went back to WWE. Bruce went to TNA and WWE after the podcast started, and it's just that is an empire. That whole empire has led to so many things for so many people.
For sure, yeah. Well, man, it's been an awesome interview. I know people are going to learn a ton from this. I appreciate you taking out the time. I think my last question would be, you keep progressing and doing new things and trying new things. So I'm curious, like, what do you think? What's the next thing, or what are you working on? Because you went from writing articles to podcasting to doing sales. So it seems like you're always thinking about the next thing. So I'm curious, like, what do you think the next thing, or what are your next goals, or what are you looking to do?
Dude, I wish I had an answer for that. I torture myself over that. I'm like, I have to know what's coming next or be prepared or whatever, because, you never know when a show is going to end or someone doesn't want to do it anymore, or, ad standards change, or, the YouTube model has changed, so that money gets cut in half or whatever. You just don't know. It's unpredictable. So I am always trying to stay ahead of things and figure out what's next. But unfortunately, for a terrible end of the interview answer, I'm not sure right now. I trust me, daily torture. I'm trying to figure out something else to, make another niche for myself. Like you said, I've changed a lot of my duties. I've leaned into different things and whatever, and I'm trying to expand and figure out. I'm trying to figure out what's next and where else I can make myself useful, therefore paid. And I don't have it right now. But luckily for me, I'm comfortable and confident in what I'm doing. But it's a great question. I wish I had the answer, and it's something I have been thinking about a lot for the past few months. Like, what am I going to do next? How can I expand? Whether not necessarily expand in my, podcast network or taking on more podcasting gigs or producing jobs, but expand, my abilities and stuff so that I'm worth something more to somebody else.
I mean, that was a great answer, man. I think that's a true entrepreneur there. So let's give it up for Joe. So Joe, why don't I give you time to, you host shows, you sell t-shirts, you have your own podcast network. So I'd love for you to just promote whatever you would like, whatever you would like to promote.
Well, everything that I do, you can find me on Twitter at JF Feeney 3RD, JFFEENEY, the number 3RD. It'll just kind of keep you posted on pretty much everything I'm working on. I'll always retweet stuff or put it up there. And at the CC Network 1 on Twitter is for all the Creative Control Network stuff. At K100 Conan is for all the Conan podcast stuff. So every Monday, I'm on The Raven Effect with Raven and Rich Bikini. Raven's a former ECW wrestler, and that's not, if you're not a wrestling fan, that doesn't really matter, because that show is like a haphazard improv comedy, crazy pop culture. I don't even know what to call it. It's just, if you know wrestling and you know Raven, then you can kind of predict the show is like from his mind. So it's short attention span stuff, but I think that show, actually, we've got a really good rapport between the three of us. It took a little bit, but I think it's there now. So that's a fun listen. Keeping it 100 with Conan and Disco. We put out 4 shows a week. Sometimes, unfortunately, even though I said earlier about being consistent, that show can be a little less consistent because of their schedules, and Conan, he's had some health issues and stuff like that, but whatever. But we do put out 4 shows a week, whether it's our main show, the extra mailbag, the K100 talks about pop culture and politics and whatnot, and then the rehash, which is the best of we spoke about before. And then I do have a t-shirt store, prowrestlingtees.com/cc with Joe Feeney. I went t-shirt crazy when I started, because I thought that's what you had to do. So there's t-shirts from my podcast I used to do. There's t-shirts from my network. And recently I actually put up a t-shirt. Only people listening to K100 will get it, but I put up a shirt called Addicted to the Blade. It was a term I said on the Conan podcast that I was sure was a wrestling term, and they claimed they hadn't heard it. And it was just a bit on the show, but so I made the t-shirt. I got the design from someone, almost put it up as like a joke to mess with them and stuff, just for the good of the show. But, t-shirt sales are cool. Anybody wants to buy a shirt, go ahead and check out prowrestlingtees.com/cc with Joe Feeney. And then, like I said, I produce and edit a bunch of the Conrad shows. So if you're a wrestling fan, check out anything that's on adfreeshows.com and Podcast Heat Network. So
that's awesome, man. You got a lot going on. So this has been one of my interviews. Usually go about 30 minutes. That's been one of the longer ones. I think the longest one was actually with 2 wrestlers, because wrestlers love to talk. So
yeah,
the first longest one was with Stevie Richards. The second longest one was with Bin Hameen. So I think you're probably the third longest one. Nice. And that's probably just because I like wrestling, so I go longer,
Well, I mean, yeah, it's been good. I was looking forward to coming on because it's not stuff I necessarily get to talk about that often too.
Yeah.
So I was like, this will be fun. And you've advised me before, like maybe I should try something similar to what we talked about here, where I can help people get podcasts started, not necessarily my network stuff, but almost like do a YouTube channel about how to make a podcast successful, or write a little book about it or whatever. So you've advised me to try stuff like that, and it's questions I don't mind answering. I do enjoy talking about it, so I was looking forward to coming on.
Awesome. Well, yeah, appreciate you coming on. So guys, check out Joe's stuff. Hopefully you learned some stuff from this, how to monetize, make money off your podcast. We appreciate you guys for watching and listening, and we'll be back next week with another great episode.